In the words of a wise man, playoffs? We're talking about playoffs? Yes, Jim. We're talking about playoffs. And no, I don't. I didn't find time to play this sound, and I didn't want to get in trouble for it. So, too bad. Welcome to the Sports Lines. I'm Steve Rabinowitz.
I'm Jay Kaplan.
And I'm Anthony Strait. Welcome to the playoffs. But also, today is a very important day in Major League Baseball because it is Jackie Robinson Day.
Right.
So, everyone out there, I would suggest, if you need a be a refresher on the man, look him up, do some research. But very important day in across baseball. You'll see number 42 on every jersey. So if you're scoring the game, don't get confused. It's just for one day, but it's a great occasion for Major League Baseball, and obviously if you're a baseball historian in general.
Amen. 76th anniversary of him breaking the color barrier. So we'll be talking baseball all year long, but yeah, absolutely. What a very important day in American sports history. But we do have a lot of NBA and NHL to talk about, and a lot of NHL to play, and a lot of that to talk about. So local bias of this show aside, sometimes we have to ignore a team or two when we get to this playoff preview, but we have 5 local NBA and NHL teams, and they all made it to the playoffs for the first time since 1994. Add to that, by the way, the Giants made the postseason, the Yankees made the postseason, the Mets made the postseason, the Liberty made the postseason, both soccer teams made the postseason. Sorry, Jets. You have another month of trying to court Aaron Rodgers. All right. So they all play in the New York, New Jersey area. We'll talk all 4 of this series involved with them, and we'll add a little extra NBA. We have a lot to get to, so let's just talk hoops. We'll start with the team that occupies the world's most famous arena, the New York Knicks. A season with no expectations, ended 47-35, their best record since the Carmelo Anthony 2012-2013 team, a second playoff spot in 3 years, a point guard in Jalen Brunson, who became, and I think this is just fact now, one of the Knicks' best free agent signings in the team's history, a resurgence of Julius Randle, albeit he's injured. He might play game 1. We are not 100% sure yet, and a very good young core. However, a lot of people complain that there is a void of a top 10 superstar on this team, the one you need to win a championship. And this past offseason, they had a chance to court one of those in Donovan Mitchell. Mitchell ended up becoming a Cleveland Cavalier, and the Cavs are the Knicks' opponent in round 1. Cleveland, this is for you. Here we go. Star Watch, X Factor, and everything else. Stat Watch, we'll talk a lot of stuff. So, Anthony, let's start with you. The Knicks have had a lot of stars this year. Which one are you watching in this 7-game series?
Well, first of all, it don't be like a bad movie script. The one that got away is suddenly they're supposed to stand in your way to greatness. And that's what the Knicks are facing with Donovan Mitchell. But the captain obviously it's got to be Jalen Brunson. I mean, you think about what the Knicks went out of their way to do. They added his dad to the coaching staff. They lost a second-round draft pick as a result of a tampering violation. But it's all paid off in the long run. When you look at what the Knicks would have been without him. For the season, averaging 24 points a game, everything career highs across the board, 6.2 assists a game on 49% shooting, 42 from behind New York, 83% free throw shooting. But his turnover rate is 9.4% of all New York players, which is ninth lowest among players of at least 25% of the team's offensive possessions. And obviously with Brunson at the point guard, he touches the ball on every possession. So to have that kind of a low turnover rate is very impressive when you think about the team with the Knicks when they run the offense through Julius Randle and how it sometimes gets stagnant. They turn the ball over a lot. But when you look at also what he was able to do this season was open up someone like Julius Randle and to get easy shots for him, whereas the offense of Burton didn't have to be on Randle, which is going to be a big difference if he plays, obviously, at some point in this series. Compared to 2 years ago when the Knicks got to the playoffs, they played Atlantic Hawks team got red hot, but more importantly, just had a focus on Julius Randle. We saw Randle struggle mightily in that 5-game series loss to Atlanta. Well, Brunson and Donovan Mitchell is going to be the highlight matchup of this series. When you think about everything that happened last offseason, And what happened the last time these two teams played? Bronson and Mitchell respectively combined for 90 points in a shootout last month that resulted in the Knicks win. Well, it was one of the games that they played without Julius Randle. So with the Knicks depth showing up that night, that do give them some confidence to be able to win a game, either game one or game two, or even both, without Julius Randle if he's not able to play to start the series. But everything circles around Jalen Brunson. Man. He's been the guy. He's been the catalyst for the New York Knicks this season. Good, when days have gone good, he's been really a microcosm of the philosophy that Tom Thibodeau has installed into this team. So he's really the guy to watch. If Jalen Brunson can continue to play he had during the regular season, even more so if Julius Randle is out, I like the Knicks' chances in the series. We added the depth that they have off the bench, as opposed to the Cleveland Cavaliers relying very heavily on their starting five.
It's very weird because the Cavs have had a very good season above expectation, but a lot of the crunch time numbers of that team is not what people expected, especially with the first team All-NBA player like Mitchell.
They've had a strange season for a team that's won 50 games. I mean, there were times it looked like war beers. It looked like a top tier team that could come out of Eastern Conference. And there's other times it looked like a middling team that just going through the motions of a long regular season. So it's also a question of what Cavalier team shows up, because really since the All-Star break, they've been kind of a Jekyll and Hyde team. Look good one week and look abysmal on some nights.
And I'll talk about that in a second. Jay, I'm not really sure which way you're going in here because you are an unpredictable wild one, but let me know what you're thinking for X Factor and or Stat Watch in this series.
Well, I kind of combined the two since I found something that, kind of works both ways. And look, Anthony talked about Julius Randle. We know that his availability for this series is an X factor. The Knicks are a different type of team without their all-star forward. And if he can't go, then the offensive scheme we've seen of late will be the scheme for their opening round series against the Cavs. The Randle-less iteration of the Knicks offense, led by point guard Jalen Brunson and small forward RJ Barrett, is even more focused on getting to the rim. So the battle between the Knicks rim attackers and the Cavs rim protectors, led by Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley, will be the X factor and could very well decide this series. If Randle can't go, look for the Knicks to try and increase the tempo as well as their number of forays to the rim. Either of Randle's potential replacements, Obi Toppin or Josh Hart if they go small ball, love to get out in transition, which could lead to an extra fast break bucket or three, and the Knicks need as many of those as they can get to prevent the Cavs defense, ranked number one in points allowed, 106.9 per game, and number two in defensive rating, 110.6, from getting set in the half court as often as possible, because when they do, any offense is in trouble. The reason for that trouble is how the Cavs have built their defense, which is from the inside out. They allow fewer points per 100 possessions during the regular season, 110.6, than any team in the NBA, thanks in large part to the dual interior presence of Allen and Mobley. Allen is one of the association's top backline defenders. Opponents only shoot 54% on dunks and layups when he was the closest defender this season, ranking 7th among the 56 players who contested at least 4 shots per game at the rim, according to Second Spectrum. Mobley is more than just a shot blocker, despite his team leading 119 rejections and 1.5 per game average. Cavs will switch him on to anyone, not just the opposing power forward or center. He's also one of the NBA's best weak side help defenders, coming from the opposite side of the lane to inspect and reject a layup or eliminate a kickout pass to the corner. Into the teeth of those tall trees, the Knicks will send a myriad of guards and wings. 27% of the Knicks' shots during the regular season came at the rim, third among playoff teams. And it all starts with Brunson, who has become one of the NBA's top individual scorers. He burned Cleveland for 25.3 points per game in the 4 regular season matchups, including 48 in that 130-116 win at the end of March that Anthony referenced. The Knicks averaged 1.1 points per possession on plays that ended with either a shot or a pass out of one of Brunson's ISOs this season, which ranked 5th among the league's high-volume isolation players, according to Synergy Sports. Thus, the Cavs will do everything they can to get the ball out of his hands, which means other Knicks have to convert at the rim or kick out to open three-point shooters, especially in the corners, where the Knicks have 5 regular rotation players who knock threes down at better than 35%. like guard Emmanuel Quickly, who no longer relies just on his floater, but he fights through contact to finish closer to the basket, like Barrett, who is fearless going to the bucket. He converts there at a 64.2% clip, like wing Quentin Grimes, who attacks closeout with the hopes of a hang time layup, like center Mitchell Robinson, who's lethal on lobs, dump offs, and putbacks. And we already talked about Hart and Toppin. There's an old adage that different styles make for a good fight. We've got that here with the Cavs rim protectors versus the Knicks rim attackers. Whichever style wins, that team is likely to advance.
One thing that I noticed about both of these teams is they kind of have similar qualities for each other, but the one thing, like anything that Mitchell does, which is why I'm not going to focus on him, can be negated by a good performance by Brunson, or if Randall comes back, a good performance by Randall. But you have to attack Evan Mobley. You're going to have to attack Evan Mobley, and Mobley is one of the 3 finalists for Defensive Player of the Year. Jaren Jackson Jr. and Brook Lopez are the other 2. I think he should win it, honestly, because Cleveland was the best defense all year. I know I've been arguing with other people like defense doesn't matter in this year's NBA, and at points it doesn't, but there's still one of the
playoffs.
best
It still does.
It does, and we've seen that in the first few games, but we don't know what Cleveland's defense is going to be in the next level because they didn't play the playoffs last year. At least some of this Knicks team did have some experience in that 5-game series back in 2021. But Mobley, 9th for blocks this year in the NBA, 14th in block percentages. He had 59 games with at least 1 rejection, 33 multi-block performances, top 20 in the league in opponent field goal percentage at the rim, tied for first in contested 3-pointers per game, 3.6, averaged the 4th most contested shots. The only 3 that did better than that is Brook Lopez, as I mentioned, also a finalist, Nick Claxton, and Ivica Zubac. First in defensive win shares, and he is in a real plus minus, he is by far the best in the league. What I'm also interested in is what Mobley will do offensively against the combination of Mitchell Robinson and Isaiah Hartenstein. If he battles them to a draw, the Knicks are going to win this series because Mobley needs to show up and show out. You can do what you want with Donovan Mitchell. He can, unless he gives you a 50-point per game every night, which he possibly could against this Knicks defense, which does have a lot of holes in it. I don't think that's a problem. But once the secondary starts getting to it, and no matter what, Randall's probably going to play in this series. The question is, what version of Randall do we get? Remember, the Randall that was the most improved player in 2021, I'm sorry, was not the player that we saw in the 2021 playoffs in a 5-game Atlanta demolition. If that is the case, the second best player on the second or third best player on the floor might be Evan Mobley, and that might be the reason why the Cavs move on. These are 2 teams that are almost like that Spider-Man meme. Let's see which one shoots their weapons at the semifinals of the Eastern Conference. All right, let's talk about the Brooklyn Nets. They started out 32-22, and then came the sledgehammer, the total destruction of the team. In a week span, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, bye-bye. But then the Nets went 13-15. However, 4 seed before, that treaded them enough water to get them a playoff spot as a 6 seed. And this team has some interesting qualities going forward. But now with that 6 seed comes a date with the other former member of that big 3, James Harden, and oh yeah, the favorite for MVP in the entire league, in Joel Embiid. Here come the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Sixers, Jay. Anyway, we're going to talk about the same stuff, and we'll have Jay talk about the Sixers' best player in this series, or second best player in this series in a moment. But Anthony, give me the Nets star watch that you're looking for in this series, possibly some Brooklyn Bridges.
Well, as much as Mikal Bridges is going to be very important to the Brooklyn Nets, if they don't want to have any shot of pulling an upset, I'm looking at Nick Claxton. And Nick Claxton,
I don't know anything of what you people are doing. I know nothing. See, it's all of these swerves: throw ball, curveball, screwball, everything down the middle.
Well, here's the thing with Nick Claxton. We saw it shades of it last year when he averaged a block and a half in 36 minutes, and it showed leaps and bounds how he could greatly improve. This year, 12 and a half points a game, 9 rebounds a game, and 2.5 blocks, and shooting 70%. Here's the thing: this season, he averages the most points per game while shooting 70% this season. He's had 36 games where he's had 3 or 4 block shots for the game. But also look at this is some of Knicks classes his numbers. He's the first player to ever to average 10 points per game, at least 10 points a game, 2.5 blocks per game, and 70% field goal percentage in a season. So he's the first guy in the entire NBA history of the NBA to ever do that. Then he has the most stops, which is a Bill Simmons reference. I know I never thought I would ever reference Bill Simmons on a show, but he coined the reference, so I had to give him a little credit. It's basically stealing some blocks combined. And he has the most this season with 246. But looking at all of that, he has the inevitable task of having to slow down Joel Embiid, who is the favorite to win the MVP. Now, when the two of them have actually guarded against each other, in the 4 games this season, the Sixers winning the season series, Claxton scored 21 points compared to Embiid scoring 26. But the problem with the Nets is they do a lot of switching on defense, and unfortunately, if you're going to switch on Joel Embiid, the fact that he can knock down the outside shot and be dominant on the inside may cause some problems. And Nick Claxton is going to have to stay on the court. I know before the show we talked about Karl Anthony Towns having these issues with foul trouble and how that really flips the script for the Timberwolves. The same way with the Brooklyn Nets, because the Nets do not have a lot of depth up front. Nick Claxton is really the best big man, even catching a lob, even definitely being a rim protector around the basket. So he's going to have to stay on the court. He's going to have to stay away from some silly, cheap fouls, because they're going to need him at the very least to try to make life difficult for Joel Embiid. If they're able to do that, if they're able to kind of reignite some of Joel Embiid's past postseason stumbles, maybe they have a puncher's chance. I mean, it's going to have to start. They're going to have to take one of these 2 games in Philadelphia, at the very least, put somewhat of a seed of doubt into the semi-system. Because look at the Brooklyn Nets since those trades, they actually have more depth as far as scoring options than when they had Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, because it was very solely dependent on those two. Now you can go to the Bridges and the Dinwiddies of the world to kind of take over again. But Claxton's importance is going to be on the defensive side of the basketball, because they're going to need him to just simply not just keep to deter a guy like James Harden or even Tobias Harris from getting to the paint so often. Even Maxwell, because he's a slash and the guys who get to the basket. But they're gonna need him to also control the glass as well. They cannot give up so many offensive rebounds and give a very potent 6-team second and third chance opportunities. So Nick Claxton, for the Nets to even remotely get close upon an upset, he's gonna have to be the next best player in this series.
I really think this is the worst matchup of honestly all of the series in both leagues. Maybe Milwaukee against Miami is worse, but I think
I would think that would take that.
I think they're both pretty bad just because of the way that the Nets play. They don't really have a big lineup anymore. And that's kind of a problem when you have like 8 wings on your team and you're playing against a team that is that can match you with the wings and then can really match you with that guy in the middle. I'm curious to see if they can give some minutes to Cam Thomas in this series. Had 46 in the season finale, although season finales in the NBA really didn't matter this year except for like anything in the West. But I'm curious. He's not really the team's secondary ball handler anymore. That's Seth Curry, who's also dropped a little bit since obviously losing the Stars. He doesn't fit as well with this team either. This is really Dinwiddie and Bridges' team in terms of taking the reins on the offensive side of the ball. And Cam Thomas, we've seen in bits and pieces having games that are insane. We've seen a 46-point game from him. He had 40 plus in 3 straight games right before the last week of January, before all of the trades were made. And I'm not 100% sure what kind of a lineup can beat the Philadelphia 76ers in a 7-game series. Can you beat them in 1 or 2? Sure. But honestly, There's a reason why tickets for Game 4 of this series are going in the black market for the grand total of $50 at Barclays Center on Monday.
Literally 1/3 of what that's literally 1/7 of what playoff tickets for the Knicks are going in the same week, by the way.
1/10 possibly. And even if you include Rangers too. So when you're the 5th priority in the local area in this postseason, not the greatest of signs. I've seen good signs from the Nets. They haven't fallen off of the face of the earth, but they're going to need to do a lot in this series, and they're going to really have to go above and beyond what we've seen this year. Can it be done? Of course it can be done. This is going to be an unpredictable playoffs, in my opinion, but this is going to be one of the harder matchups for a team in the first round. I like the Sixers a lot, Jay, but I just don't think there is a lot of good matchup depth here, and we'll see what happens. And I wonder if Philadelphia is just going to boot Ben Simmons out of spite, or if Ben's not going to make the trip. That might happen. All right. Ben Simmons is surely not a player to watch in this series or any series, but Philly's got a bunch of nice all-stars and players who are going to get their flowers at the end of the season. Which one are you looking at, Jay, to watch?
Well, we all know that the focus of the Nets' defensive game plan, as Anthony talked about earlier, will be about the Sixers MVP candidate and the NBA's leading scorer at 33.1 points per game, and that's center Joel Embiid, and rightfully so. Will they actually attempt to stop him, or will they figure he's going to get his and focus on stopping his supporting cast? Either strategy will require an all-star level performance from a Sixers player who inexplicably was not an all-star this season. That's point guard James Harden, who is Philly's second leading scorer at 21 points per game and the NBA's assist leader at 10.7 dimes per game. Harden's health will be as much a factor as how the Nets elect to defend him in determining how effective he can be for the Sixers in this series, though I don't think Philly needs Rockets MVP level Harden to get past the Nets. That being said, in the 5 games after Harden returned from resting his sore Achilles, his numbers, 16.6 points per game, 8.6 assists, as well as his 2-point field goal percentage and free throw attempts per game were all down from the all NBA level play we saw from him in December through February. And in watching him on the court, he seemed to be a step slower. Having a week off from the end of the regular season to the start of round 1 will hopefully improve Harden's health, which will hopefully lead to Harden once again orchestrating the NBA's 4th most efficient offense like the maestro he has been all season. And if that's the case, then we'll see Harden running the pick and roll with Embiid, which has been a ruthlessly efficient play this season for Philly. 76ers generate 17.5 points per game directly off plays where Embiid sets an on-ball screen for Harden, by far the most among any combination in the NBA per second spectrum tracking. The pair also averaged 1.14 points per direct pick on these plays, which ranks in the top 10 among combinations to run at least 400 plays together. Overall, Harden to Embiid is the highest assist combo in the league by a mile with 244 field goals, according to play-by-play stats, 89 more than any other player in the NBA had to a single teammate, a large percentage of which resulted in rhythm Embiid mid-range jumpers from the elbow or the nail, where he's been lethal all season. 174 of those assists were on Embiid's 491 field goals in the paint, 41 more than all other Sixers combined, and a decent amount were pocket passes out of that lethal pick and roll. Another area where the Sixers need Harden to be Harden is isolations. Based on passes that led to shots, the Sixers run the second most isolation actions in the NBA. It's 15.6% of their offense, according to Synergy Sports. The Sixers are also efficient when running their ISOs, averaging 1.105 points per isolation possession, which is also second in the association. Harden ranks 5th in total isolation percentages with 358 and 4th in efficiency, 1.115 points per possession, according to Synergy. The Sixers put Harden in a lot of isolations, and for good reason. The results are usually positive. The final area where the Sixers need Harden to be Harden is when he's running in the minutes Philly plays when Embiid is resting during games. Philly still hasn't really found a backup center they can consistently rely on, and they've been outscored by 0.6 points per 100 possessions in the 652 total minutes that Harden has been on the floor without Embiid. Philly center averaged a career-high 34.6 minutes per game this season, but that's likely to go up to around the 38.5 he averaged in last year's playoffs, so Harden will only have to keep the Sixers' offense afloat without Embiid for about 10 minutes a night. All of these areas are key to the Sixers' playoff success in this series and beyond, which is why as much as Philly needs Embiid to keep playing at his MVP level, they need a healthy and fully operational Harden if they're going to beat the Nets, which is the first step in bringing home the Sixers' first championship since Dr. J and Moses Malone in 1982-83.
Since me and Anthony weren't even born, that's too. But I've seen there is if the Eastern Conference champion doesn't come out of that Bucks, Celtics, and Sixers group, I will be very shocked. I think they've been above and beyond, honestly, everybody in both leagues this entire season, and I'm very curious to see. There's been a lot of talk at those three have easy roads in the first round, and we'll talk about their matchups in the second, and we'll talk about the other two's matchups in the second, Jay. I'm tending to believe it, but it all depends on these game ones today, because if any of these three steal game ones, and I think the Hawks could, and obviously the Nets always come up with a weird one. I know they stole one in the non-Harden and in the non-Irving and Durant era against the Sixers. That could be a little interesting, but we'll see. All right. There are 6 other series, yes, 6, that we have to talk about in the NBA. Oh, this postseason is a tricky field. Let's finish out the East first with Jay, and I'll introduce everything separately to kind of get the mood going, but we'll go back to back with everybody's picks. All right, Jay, I want to start with the 2-7. Okay. It is Hawks and Celtics. They are a little rejuvenated, the Hawks, after their blowout win in the play-in game in Miami on Tuesday night. But they're taking on a reigning, defending Eastern Conference championship team in the Boston Celtics that are starting to gel again and look like they're regular form in the beginning of the season. What are you looking at in this series?
The storyline for me in this series is the Celtics versus Trae Young, how they hound him on defense and will hunt him on offense. This series is all about Hawks star guard Trae Young and how the Celtics will look to do that. Young, at 26.2 points per game and 10.2 assists per game, is the only player other than James Harden to average 20-plus points per game and 10-plus assists. And he is the alpha of the Hawks offense, which is number 2 in the NBA in points per game, 123.3, since Quinn Snyder took over as head coach on February 28th. The Celtics are the only team in the postseason that ranked in the top 5 in the NBA in points scored, number 4 at 117.9. Points allowed, number 5 at 111.4. Offensive efficiency, number 2 at 118 even. And defensive efficiency, number 3 at 111.5 during the regular season per Basketball Reference. That Boston offense is led, as usual, by Jason Tatum, 30.1 points per game. He's the first Celtic to average at least 30 points ever. And Jaylen Brown, who dropped in 26.6 himself. They are the second pair of Celtics to average 25 points per game in the season since Larry Bird and Kevin McHale did so all the way back in 1986-87. Tatum and Brown scored at least 25 points in the same game 33 times this season, the most by a pair since Shaq and Kobe back in 2000, 2001 per ESPN stats and info. That offense will relentlessly attack the opponent's weakest defender, and there may not be a defender in this league with a bigger target on him than Young. It's pretty much a given that whomever Young guards will be setting ball screens for Jason Tatum in an effort to get Young switched onto the guy who ranked 6th in the NBA in total isolation possessions this season with 347. During the regular season, the Celtics scored 126.7 points per 100 possessions against Atlanta with Young on the court. Granted, with Young only playing 64 minutes against Boston this season, it's a tiny sample size. Still, a look at the film shows that the numbers were indicative of the negative defense that Young plays during that time. In the Celtics' 134-125 win back on March 11th, Boston attacked Young immediately and were relentless in challenging his defense. They made him cover screens at the arc. They isolated him on the perimeter. They tried to post him up early in transition. They beat him with cuts. They forced him into bad spots and picked apart his weaknesses defensively. The Hawks used Young in several different matchups, but the Celtics found him and went straight at him no matter where he ended up. On the defensive end of the floor, the Celtics will go after a player who has a bit of a feast or famine playoff history. Young's first playoff run in 2021 was a feast. He averaged 28.8 points per game and 9.5 assists. In his second playoff run in 21-22, it was a famine. He averaged just 15.4 points per game and 6 assists and shot horribly from both the floor and beyond the arc. From the backcourt, both Marcus Smart and Derek White will probably see some trade time, but White might see more. He's a good matchup against Young. because he's more agile and he's more balanced as a defender. He's the best in the NBA at guarding from behind while feeding the ball into coverage, which is the ideal counter to Young's penchant for drawing fouls on rear view contests. From the front court, the more the Celtics can play Robert Williams, the better. The Hawks beat the Heat in the play-in game because Clint Capella and John Collins were able to dominate the offensive glass. So Boston will need Williams on the floor to negate that, but he'll also make it harder for Young to get into his floater game in the paint, which will help limit Young's shot profile. Young's going to make the Celtics guard him from a step or two inside half court. He will get his buckets. He will draw some exasperating fouls, and he's going to drop some amazing dimes. But the Celtics will go right at him on the other end of the court and exploit Young's shaky defense. Atlanta's chances of turning this into an actual series will depend on Young's ability to, A, engineer big offensive outings, while 2, not getting shredded at the other end of the court. But if what we see is more in line with that game back in March, this series could be a short one, and the Celtics will be moving on, and the Hawks will be going home.
DeJounte Murray is probably as big of a factor in my mind. One of the reasons why Young was so terrible last year, he was playing one of the best defensive teams in the league in Miami, and they just found ways to double team him and basically to frustrate a player who seems frustrated when he wakes up in the morning, because that's the type of player Trae Young is. This is DeJounte Murray's who had a very good game in that play-in on Tuesday. This is his first real playoff experience. I'm very curious to see if that changes the Hawks' trajectory in these playoffs, because they were a clusterfuck by any sorts of the imagination this year. That's just...
So they have gotten better since Snyder replaced McMillan.
They have.
Nothing else, the locker room is a less toxic environment.
For now. Locker room will always be a toxic environment when you have one of the most toxic players in the league in that locker room, and the one that probably got rid of Nate McMillan, who got rid of the coach before Nate McMillan, because that's Trae Young for you. All right. Jay, we have a Heat Bucks third time in 4 years matchup. Bucks are heavily favored. Like I said, this might be the biggest mismatch of round one, considering what the Bucks do on offense and what the Heat don't do on offense. Well, what are you looking for?
To me, I'm going to be looking at Chris Middleton. The Bucks took home the Larry O'Brien Trophy in 2021, but the players have called this year's team the deepest yet. Center Brook Lopez, 15.9 points per game, 6.7 boards, 2.5 blocks. And as you noted, he's a Defensive Player of the Year finalist. Point guard Drew Holiday, 19.3 points per game, 7.4 assists, 5.1 rebounds. Each of them put up their best seasons in a Buck uniform. The team added forward Jay Crowder at the trade deadline for some depth without trading away any of their primary rotation members. And forward Joe Ingles is shooting a little under 41% from downtown in his return from a torn ACL. Oh, and all Giannis Antetokounmpo did was carry the Bucks to the NBA's best record by averaging 31.1 points per game on 55.3% shooting, with 11.8 rebounds and 5.7 assists. He's the first player to put up those numbers since Wilt Chamberlain back in 1965-66. But as I said, the Bucks' chances of getting back to the NBA Finals may hinge on the health and productivity of small forward Chris Middleton. A late season wrist injury kept Middleton out of last season's playoffs, which ended with a Game 7 loss to the Celtics in the East semis. And he's dealt with knee issues this season. He missed the first 20 games and then spent another 18 on the injured list from December 17 through January 21. Played in just 33 games all season, but 26 of the final 36. And after rejoining the starting lineup in March, he averaged 18.7 points per game, 4.8 boards, 6.4 assists, and shot 46.2% from the floor over those 11 games. When he's healthy, he gives the Bucks that secondary 20 points per game scorer that they need to be complete, someone who can shoot from mid-range or deep and will keep defenses honest when they decide to double Giannis. We all remember what he did in the 2021 playoffs, averaging 23.6 points per game, 7.6 boards, 5.1 assists in 40.1 minutes overall. He upped that to 24 points per game, 6.3 boards and 5.3 assists in 42.5 minutes per game in the finals to help the Bucks bring the title home. Bucks had the best record in the league this season, as I said, even though Holiday, Middleton, and Antetokounmpo played a total of just 236 minutes together. That made them the 35th most used trio on the team and the 1,113th most used trio in the NBA. All three were available for just 25 games this season, including one against the Heat. And Middleton was in the starting lineup for only 12 of those 25. However, the Bucks scored a highly efficient 122.9 points per 100 possessions in those 236 minutes with all three of their stars on the floor. That was the best mark among the 42 Milwaukee trios that played at least 200 minutes together. So if all three are healthy, the Bucks have the ability to put at least two of their three offensive anchors on the floor for large stretches. If Middleton's back to form, it's possible the Bucks' big three will play more minutes together in the playoffs than they did the entire regular season. When the Bucks won the championship 2 years ago, Holiday, Middleton, and Antetokounmpo played 565 minutes together in the postseason. That's an average of almost 27 a game, including almost 45 minutes together in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference semis. The Bucks' biggest flaw in the postseason last year was an inability to score consistently. Their offense ranked second to last among the 16 playoff teams in offensive efficiency. During the regular season this year, Milwaukee was 15th, league average in offensive efficiency at 114.3, relying on a defense that ranked number 4 in efficiency at 110.9 and number 3 in rebounding percentage, 52.1, to do the heavy lifting. They'll need to score more, especially to get past the second round. I don't think Miami, with the worst scoring offense in the NBA, 109.5 points per game, and one of the worst three-point shooting, 34%, 27th in the NBA after being number 1 at 38% last year, and one of the worst rebounding teams, 27th after being 18 last year. Combined with their drop-off defensively, they went from number 4 to number 9 in defensive rating, has enough really to challenge the Bucks in the first round, even if Jimmy Butler goes full buckets mode like he did in last year's playoffs when he had 6 games of at least 35 points. For the Bucks, this series is all about seeing if Middleton is close to 100%. If he is, it'll go a long way to getting the Bucks back to being the fully operational Death Star we saw in that championship season.
It's all about Middleton. It's all about Middleton. It's all about Middleton. I think when this team is healthy, there's nobody that can beat them. But again, without Middleton, they have a lot of. There's still a team that is a top 3 team.
Oh, yeah.
But I think there's more of a possibility of them losing. We saw that against the Celtics last year.
Yep.
Anthony, your turn as you and me will finish off the West. All right. Anthony, KD and Kawhi against each other in a first round series. That seems like Xmas for the NBA fans, but it's the Clippers. So of course a star is injured. PG is not going to be around for most of this series and possibly the entire postseason. But what's the key in the West 4-5 between the Suns and the Clippers?
I just want to put it out there that I was not a jinx to Paul George. I know
you were there. You were there,
dude. He was sensational that night. He was sensational that night, and he got injured, and he hasn't been
like your reverse Mets curse all of a sudden.
Let me tell you. But Paul George's injury that he suffered back on March 21st, pretty much could possibly keep him out the entire postseason. How big is that for the Clippers? I mean, obviously, they can use his 24 points a game, his creativity on offense, but he's one of the best two-way players in the league. And that also means defensively, his main primary responsibility would have been in this series guarding Devin Booker and helping out on Kevin Durant. But with him not being in the lineup, that really takes away a lot of the responsibility. That puts some more responsibility on Kawhi Leonard to guard Kevin Durant one-on-one for at least a good part of the series. By the way, this is the finals matchup we didn't get a chance to get in 2019 because Kevin Durant was injured, and then the one game he came back in the finals, he tore his Achilles and pretty much lost a year and a half of his career. But the match between Kawhi and Kevin Durant is between two of the most efficient scorers in the league. Yeah, Kevin Durant, by the way, who's 22-2 in the last 24 games, going back to early this season when he was still a Brooklyn Net, averaging 29.1 points a game on 67% shooting. That's the highest true shooting percentage in NBA history for any player who averaged 25 points in 25 games or more. And this is in the case of 439 total instances. In short, he shot 67% in the paint, 56% from mid-range, 40% from three-pointers, and 91% from the free throw line. So the term walking bucket is literally Kevin Durant's middle name at this point. Kawhi Leonard is not a slash in his own right, who, by the way, this is his first playoff series since the 2021 semifinals against Utah, where he suffered the injury and obviously missed the rest of the postseason when the Clippers got to the conference finals. Kawhi Leonard averaged 27 points a game on 66% shooting after the All-Star break. And the last time he was in the playoffs, he averaged 30 points a game on 67%, and this was one of the highest marks in NBA playoff history for a player who have averaged at least 30 points in 8 or more playoff games. One of the X factors in this series, at least for the Clippers, is going to be Norman Powell. He's been a key cog whenever Kawhi or Paul George has been out of the lineup, averaging 17 points a game with 26 minutes coming off the bench. With Paul George out, that's going to be more responsibility on a guy like him to give him quality minutes, to be to give him quality defensive presence, but also to not stand to give the Clippers an opportunity to at least remotely try to slow down Kevin Durant or even Devin Booker for that matter. When you look at the Suns, it's going to be Chris Paul. I can't believe we're saying Chris Paul being the next factor in any series, but his production is down this season. He is 37 years old. However, he is still one of the best ball handlers and offensive, offensive catalysts in the NBA. And if he can be the best point guard in this series, which is not saying a lot because Russell Westbrook has played well against the Clippers, but he's still a little bit on the erratic side. He could be unpredictable. The game was that he started off strong in the first half and disappeared in the second half, which has been Russell Westbrook the last 2 years. Like, he's been great in spurts. But if Chris Paul can at least be remotely the better point guard, that gives the Suns a great chance to end this series. I can't really see the series going past 5 games. And that's because Phoenix, when you're doing DeAndre Ayton as well, and that big four that the Suns could throw at you, that's a lot of offensive firepower that because the Clippers don't have Paul George to at least negate some of that. It's going to put a lot on Kawhi, and it's going to put a lot on. It's going to be asking Russell Westbrook to take on more responsibility than you would like if you're Ty Lue. I see the Suns making this a short series, maybe a gentleman sweep in 5 games. I just don't see any answer for Kevin Durant along that Clippers lineup.
8-0, by the way. The Suns have not lost with Kevin Durant in the lineup. And you talk about offensively a fully operational Death Star. That's a fully operational Death Star. But I think a lot of the unpredictability in this postseason is, can that group of, honestly, just really Paul and Booker, but who knows? I'm sorry, just Paul and Durant, but who knows? But can that group stay healthy? Because if they don't, they are susceptible to anything. And that really, really relates to all of these series. So check back in a week's time. I have a feeling we might see a little bit of an interesting scenario going around. That's just me. I don't wish for anything, but I just feel like the up and down that we've seen this entire season, that could mean something come this postseason time.
Yeah, I mean, the Clippers have, I would say, a puncher's chance because Ty Lue is one of the best in-game adjustment coaches in the league. So he does do a great job of matching up very well in game. But like I said, I mean, if these guys are the Suns superstars, if they're healthy, this is not going to be a good series. But an injury can flip the series one way or another. Obviously, the Clippers going into the series shorthanded, it really leaves them at a disadvantage when it's one of your main guys, just not on offense, but on the defensive side of the basketball also.
People were saying, how many games would it take to integrate KD into this offense? They need time. We were wrong. We were very wrong.
It's 20 minutes. 20 minutes of real-time basketball for that to be no longer be a question.
We were wrong. One of the best players in the league is KD, and he would have been a first-team All-NBA player if he played more games this season. He is one of the dangerous weapons in the league. One other interesting storyline, and I'm sorry if I'm ranting about this, KD and Kawhi playing each other, that's probably outside of LeBron James, the 2 most influential players in the last 10 years in the NBA. Kawhi has the rings.
2019.
Yep. Kawhi has the rings. KD has the stats. So it'll be very interesting to see those 2 finally playing in the series. All right. Anthony, the other occupant to the crypto. Why the hell are we still naming it this arena? Is the Los Angeles Lakers. They're actually playing back in full crowds for the first time in a long time. Don't realize that 2020 was the bubble. In 21, they were still playing in half crowds. So this suddenly dangerous Memphis Grizzlies, they're kind of back to their old ways of winning, and they're in the way. So can the Lakers win this 2-7 matchup? Anthony, what's the key here?
Well, the key here is going to be Anthony Davis, without question. I mean, you think about, we look at across the Memphis Grizzlies, no Steven Adams, no Brandon Clark. two big important pieces to the defense and also the rebounding. Anthony Davis got to establish himself. He's got to be the best player on this for both for the Lakers in this series, because I feel like when you watch the Lakers and I was able to, obviously I was in Los Angeles. I got to watch the Clippers up close. So I got to watch the Lakers also from the vantage point of the Lakers standpoint, the fan base. Anthony Davis is a source of frustration at times too, because you realize how good he can be and so dominant. He'll give you a 37-15 night one game, and then give you 10-5 the next. And for the Lakers to have a chance to pull the upset, they're gonna have to need more at Anthony Davis. When you look at against the Grizzlies this season, he's averaged 22 points a game, 11.5 rebounds. 2 of those 3 games were without LeBron James, and obviously he missed the third game of that contest also while he was injured. So this would be the first time this season that the Lakers are playing the Grizzlies with both the star players healthy and on the court at the same time. So that's to be interesting to know. But also when you look at LeBron James, Dylan Brooks is going to be the guy guarding him, and we know for all the antics, for all the trash talk, Dylan Brooks is a very solid defensive player. He's physical. He does get up into the face of the offensive player. We saw LeBron James virtually gas in the overtime win in the playing game against Minnesota. I would expect Dylan Brooks to be no different. In the one game he got at LeBron James, he held him to 23 points, 8 of 21 shooting, and pretty much in Dylan Brooks fashion, let the world know about it. This is Grizzlies team. They're back to playing efficient basketball, but this is a team that has went through God knows everything this season, between the injuries, the situation with Ja Morant and live streaming, holding a gun in a club, and just been so many days for a team that it's the season. I remember on the show I actually picked them to come out of the Western Conference, but a lot of talking, they were becoming for a while the NBA's bad guys as far as
they deserve that.
Yeah, get under the skin of a lot of people for doing a lot more talking when they haven't accomplished a whole lot just yet. But and also this, I would dub this series, by the way. This is a special series. This is called the Shannon Sharpe series, because we all know what happened back in January when Shannon Sharpe was courtside at a game and how that turned out. But the Lakers have more depth, obviously, since the All-Star break. They brought in D'Angelo Russell, who has to play a lot better than he did in that playing game. They had Jared Vanderbilt, William Hashimura, Malik Beasley. And let's not forget Austin Reeves, who has been sensational for the Lakers this season, especially when Anthony Davis has struggled or when LeBron James has been out of the lineup. As far as getting the Lakers to that 16-7 mark, to at least get them in a position to get back into the playing tournament to get to the postseason. The Grizzlies they've kind of established themselves, but you do wonder how the absence of 2 bigs is going to hurt this team, especially if Jared Jackson Jr., who is Defensive Player of the Year finalist, is in foul trouble because you don't have much depth up front. And if the Lakers are smart and there are times where you watch Darvin Ham and this offense, you wonder if you forget Anthony Davis is on the court, get the ball to him a little more often. I would think the Lakers will give a heavy dose at Anthony Davis at the very least to try to get to the foul line. The Lakers shoot the most free throws of any team in the NBA. However, they missed the short free throws, so they're pretty average free throw team. That kind of offsets everything. But when you look at this matchup, it's almost tailor-made for the Lakers to pull an upset because of the Grizzlies season and the fact that they maybe the confidence is borderline on arrogance at times too. And now you got a Laker team in that wasn't overwhelming as far as being an overtime to get into the postseason, but God, you really want to give LeBron James an opportunity at a second chance at life of mulligan, but this is a video game. And you get, and the fact that the Lakers were able to win on Tuesday night and do get some rest, I think would definitely help this lineup. It would help LeBron with his ankle. It would help some of the other guys that are banged up. The Grizzlies have been sitting around since Sunday, so there's always the case of Russ being a factor in that first game. So this series is going to key on game one. If Memphis can come out and play their up-tempo, fast-paced game, the Lakers or a team, a creature have and turn the ball over quite a bit. In this season, they allowed 23.5 points a game in the transition, in part because they are very sloppy and killers with the basketball. If Memphis can play the up-tempo game, then it's definitely going to be a Memphis Grizzlies victory in this series. But if the Lakers can slow the game down and make it more of a half-court offense, where the Grizzlies have struggled when John Morant is not able to create his own shot with the shot clock winding down, then this series can easily go 7 games to go either way. But I see the series going at least six games. I'm going to stick with the Grizzlies in this series because I do feel like the better team over the longer series will win out. And with the Grizzlies having a home court and in that arena, that could be a key, especially for a young team. But you don't want to mess around with a team that has LeBron James in the postseason. So it's game one is going to be really the biggest game of this series to determine which way, either way, the momentum is going to go throughout the best of 7.
And I've already got a nickname for this series, guys. This is the Shut Up and Dribble series. You have LeBron, who was infamously told to do so by a certain Fox News host, who she shall remain nameless.
Or Ingram, she's not remaining nameless.
Fair. And then you have the Grizzlies, who probably should shut up and dribble because, as Anthony said, they talk way too much for a team that hasn't done anything to warrant the amount of talk that they talk.
Now I'm going to rant for a second here. Very small rant because it'll lead up to my series. 1, 2, and 3 are the weirdest 1, 2, and 3 I think we've ever seen in an NBA postseason in Denver, Memphis, and Sacramento. And a lot of people are saying, oh, look at the Warriors, look at the Suns, look at the Lakers. I'm like, okay, if you've done that, you haven't actually watched any NBA this regular season. I know with the stats that you just said about Milwaukee, a lot of the great players don't play with each other seemingly in the regular season due to injuries, due to rest, due to both, but numbers matter. And I think this Memphis-LA series is going to be a very good test of it because you saw, especially in that play-in game, LA looked tired in a lot of different areas, which is a good. I mean, you're going to go through your top of Minnesota. That's a Minnesota team that had Towns at the 5. And even though Towns was playing at his best, they still were small. And you saw just a lot of brain farts at the end of that game. And I'm very curious to see. The Lakers have had to play at 100 pretty much for the second half of the entire season. The Grizzlies haven't had to do that. And I'm very curious to see if that changes anything in this postseason. Okay. The Golden State Warriors and Sacramento Kings is one of the most intriguing series I think I've seen in a very long time, just because of the defending champion start on the road against a team that hasn't been in the playoffs since 2006, breaking the now longest playoff drought in the 4 major sports. Hi, Jets. You're down number 1, by the way. Just there's so many great things in this series. So I'm going to kind of lead it up into this one little angle. Who's getting a stop? Because these two teams are really elite offensively. The Kings, highest offensive rating in NBA history of 118.6. They're pretty fast and paced too at 12th, although we know the Warriors, they're number 1 in pace this season. But despite the fact that the Kings are 7th in defending against the fast break, their overall defensive rating is 116. That is 24th in the NBA. And we've known by the times that we bashed the Brooklyn Nets on this program in their playoff runs last year, 2 years before that. You need to be good on defense to win championships. But
look at the Warriors last year.
Yeah. And you've seen a lot. But the Warriors are not great on defense either. They're only 12th this year in defense. That is not the Steve Kerr team that you know and love. They preach defense. They just haven't done it, especially on the road this year. And Draymond.
Now throw out the caveat as to why, Rabbi. The number is deceptive. Because they haven't had Gary Payton all year.
Well, it's not. Well, first of
Wiggins.
all, it's not as deceptive because of the fact that they still had Draymond Green, one of the best defensive players in the league. They've had several gaps this year in that. And yes, but they let Payton go in free agency and needed to bring him back because of that. So that number is not deceptive. Payton hasn't played since March 26th, and this was the second point I was getting to, by the way. And so he's going to play. He's gotten better. He's gotten himself back into the game, and he's going to be a key part of this postseason. Wiggins hasn't played at all since February, so he will be back. He's going to probably start off the bench in game one. He was the second best offensive player in that series last year. The defense is obviously going to be what he really, really needs to do. He is the guy that's going to probably guard De'Aaron Fox, probably guard pretty much whoever the Warriors' best player is on the court at that time. But you also want to see what Mike Brown does against his former team. Mike Brown knows the Warriors inside and out and was the main sub for Steve Kerr as coach when he had health issues. And so the very key is, do the Kings attack, or do the Kings say, hey, Draymond, take that 15-footer. Hey, Jordan Poole, you deserve 25 shots a game, and then making him brick 19 or 20. Because if Steph Curry, Dante DiVincenzo, and Klay Thompson are shooting threes, that's not going to be good. So De'Aaron Fox is a good on-the-ball defender. Davion Mitchell is a good on-the-ball defender. And remember, the Kings have Harrison Barnes, another old Warrior, out there to guard. There are so many fascinating things about this series that I'm very, very interested. How does Kuminga and Moody play into this series? When does Wiggins start ramping up? I don't think you can put him in more than 20 minutes in game one because there's a lot, although again, NBA 2023, we don't know why Wiggins was out for that long. And if it was personal, it's never been said. It's never been said.
It was a family health issue, though not his.
It's never been said, and I don't want to accuse him, but we know it's not injury related.
No, it's not related to him at all. It's a family, one of his relatives. That's what it was.
I don't care. Yeah, the point of it, let's get off the tack here. I don't care. The point is, it wasn't injury related, so you might be able to integrate him into the lineup quicker, and that's all I'm saying. But just with that, the fact that the Warriors were a terrible road team this year, needed to win a lot of road games late to avoid being the worst road playoff team of all time. Believe it or not, Michael Jordan's Bulls, I think, in their first playoff season only had 10 wins on the road in the year that Jordan scored 63 against the Celtics. But that's what I'm curious, because that Warriors team pretty much just has to drive over to Sacramento. And these two teams have had great games over the years, even before Sacramento became everyone's darling this year. So let's light the beam and quickly talk about the other series going on. And that's the 8-1 between Minnesota and Denver. Never mind Minnesota, who got in last night. And in the words of Michael Wilbon, one of the stupidest teams in the NBA. It's not even a question. We know about the Rudy Gobert incident from last week.
He's missing game one, right? He's out for game one.
No, Gobert just missed the play-in.
Oh, the play-in game.
Played last night. He actually had shoulder soreness. I believe he had a decent game, but Timberwolves just destroyed the Thunder. Played pretty good in the minutes without Gobert to get them that 8th seed last Sunday against New Orleans, and then played pretty well in that second game. But I'm very curious to see what Minnesota does just in general, because first time in a long time, but they've made the playoffs for 2 consecutive years. First time in a long time. By the way, Gobert with 21 last night, played 32 minutes on the court. Only Towns had more. So they got essentially 49 points from their big men last night. One reason why Oklahoma City couldn't end with them. But it's all about the Nuggets for me. Again, they only had 53 wins this year. Just remember, the Phoenix Suns last year had 64 as the top seed in the league. But uncharted waters, had a big lead in this in the West. They've been pretty much in the lead in the West pretty much the entire year. And now that Nikola Jokic doesn't have to hear about why he shouldn't be MVP from everybody and their mother, now he can focus on having a full and healthy team for the first time since the bubble of 2020, where Jamal Murray just went off with 50-point game after 50-point game after 50-point game. We all remember the Donovan Mitchell team duel with him in the first round of the bubble in 2020. But just remember this, 2 years ago, the Nuggets had Austin Rivers and Facundo Campanzo in their starting lineup.
Right.
I know. I think it was a sneeze. I don't even know. That might be a curse word in Italian. I'm not 100% sure. But even though Denver's won 9 of their final 20 games and had a very, very slog to the end of the season, the fact that Porter is healthy and hasn't really peaked yet, the fact that Jamal Murray is healthy, and I believe the number is, if I read correctly, 8-2 in his their playoff history when Murray scores 30 points or more, and we know Murray can score 30 points or more anytime. I'm very interested to see how the Nuggets run happens, because if it's not now for probably the best player in the NBA, overall skill set, don't worry, Embiid apologist, I still think he was the MVP this year, but overall skill set, I think Jokic is a unicorn, a one of one, a player that does everything and is just has skills that we'll never ever see in the NBA again for a big man. I'm very curious to see how the Nuggets do with the run as the favorites kind of in the West. This should be an easy test for them. They should only have to go to 5, maybe 6 games with Minnesota. Minnesota's frisky. You never know what Minnesota Chris Finch is going to bring out the door every single night. But overall, if Denver wants to be a champion, this should be a series. That should be not a kick, but something that's pretty simple.
Mm-hmm.
Well, two days I definitely throw out. This has been the most wide open Western Conference I think we've seen in a very long time. Well, when we thought we had the favorites figured out, it's just been such a there was at one point a game and a half separating the 4th and the 11th seed in the Western Conference. Going into the final stretch of the season. That's number one. Number two, Jokic has just been a typical Jokic season. He's been playing lights out, and look, I can respect a man who loves the SpongeBob SquarePants as much as Nikola Jokic does, but with Minnesota, it's going to be interesting to see with McDaniels inexplicably breaking his own hand and knocking himself out of the playoffs.
Just another stupid thing that I forgot to mention.
The best perimeter defensive player, how much that's going to be missed when you have the likes of Aaron Gordon and a healthy Jamal Murray finally in the arsenal for the Denver Nuggets. I mean, Minnesota, they handicapped themselves. That's pretty much the first team to ever do that. They handicapped themselves going into the postseason with their own stupidity. It should be a long series. I think Minnesota's good enough to get 1 or 2 games, but Anthony Edwards has got to be the key. He's got to be the
he has to show up.
He has to basically show up because he was MIA in the first playoff game against the Lakers Tuesday night. He was 3 for 18.
It was a really inexplicable performance, honestly.
It was about as bad as it get. It was only offset by D'Angelo Russell's own nightmarish performance Tuesday night. But he played well. He played well enough last night to help Minnesota. He's gonna have to show up. I mean, that's just pretty much what it is. Minnesota want any shot of stealing a game. Anthony Edwards has got to be the guy. If you're running your offense with Rudy Gobert, you're in trouble, and that does not pose well for a Minnesota Timberwolves team that has a Mike Conley, a guy who is experienced as far as playoff pressure. Like I said, I don't see no answers for Jokic. I mean, there was one time a couple years ago that Rudy Gobert was talking about he got him on the court, except Jokic had 47 points that night. So I don't know how much effectiveness Rudy Gobert was defensively, or it's going to be for a guy who just score buckets and just rebound without showing much effort as Jokic does.
Yeah, what's interesting to me about the West, I mean, it's as wide open, as you guys said, as it's been in years. And I think part of that is because you've got 2 teams in Golden State and in Phoenix who we think we know who they are, but we haven't really seen consistent evidence of who we think they are or who we think they will be. Solely because, I mean, Phoenix obviously has undergone a complete, change of roster with the Durant trade, and the Warriors, with all of their injuries and their inexplicable ability to not win outside of, the Bay Area, you wonder, is Jekyll going to show up or is Hyde going to show up? Is Kevin Durant truly the missing piece from that Suns team from last year? And, will he be able to take them to the next step that they couldn't reach last year? Are the Warriors, now that they're healthy, are we gonna see the some semblance of the juggernaut that we saw last year? Because they now literally have all of the pieces, with Wiggins back, with Peyton back. So that's why, as much as the Nuggets are a deserving number one seed, and they've been probably the most solid and consistent team in the West all season long, you got you got these, you got Phoenix and you got Golden State lurking, and they may be, 4, 5, 6 seeds, whatever. But when you look at them, you go, that doesn't mean anything. Not with what they have on their roster and the weapons they can bring to bear in any series. So it's going to make a very interesting Western Conference playoffs.
It doesn't, but
a lot more unsettled than the East, where I agree with you, Rabbi. If the East representative in the NBA Finals is any team other than Milwaukee, Philly, or Boston, I'm going to be shocked.
I will say this about the number that's next to the name of the seeds. It does show regular season performance, and it's going to show two very big questions that are going to go forward really for the entire NBA that have been issues. One, is there an actual switch that these teams can turn on? It's not always the case in the NBA, especially maybe, not always the case. And number two, the lack of playing together kill a lot of these teams, because there's a reason why we're going to have requirements for awards from now on. The NBA needs these players.
Well, you talk about, teams, the flip side of that, Rabbi, the Kings are an example of a team that has played together for most of the year. So, how much will that chemistry that they've developed over the course of this year offset their utter lack of playoff experience?
And which is fine. And by the way, the Knicks would also qualify in that category as well, especially before the Randall trade. Yeah, it's not just an utter lack of playoff experience. It's literally everybody outside of the coach. Even Mike Brown said,
Harrison Barnes.
Barnes too, but he is minor role. Even Mike Brown said, I would want to play us if we were any other teams. So put it on the bulletin board. All right. Contractually obligated to say it. Moving on to the quest for Lord Stanley. It's jealous. The New York Rangers and New Jersey Devils have pretty much been playing dog this season, and the tail that same dog is chasing. The Rangers ended up with 107 points. That's 3 less than their Eastern Conference Finals season last year. And if Anthony knows, with me and him watching a team this season, they've been up and down a lot this season. New Jersey ended up with 112 points. 2 Hughes, no waiting. That's their most regular season points ever. And the 3rd best record in the National Hockey League this season. The Devils won the season series against the Rangers 3-1. And unlike the NBA, they a lot of them played the same exact team that they do in the postseason. We actually have evidence to see it, not this guy sat out, this guy sat out, and this guy sat out. So it'll be the first time in 11 years we'll see these two lock up in the postseason. Devils won that series 4-2 with the Eastern Conference Finals on the way to the Stanley Cup Finals. Let's ignore that and talk about this season. It's 2023. Move on! Jay, give me a key for the Rangers in this series.
I mean, it pretty much is the Captain Obvious one. I mean, it's how do they deploy Patrick Kane? The Rangers got Kane for the playoffs. So now is when they're expecting to see that trade pay dividends. That being said, there's still some kinks being worked out with regards to how they play him. Kane's played only 19 games with the Blue Shirts since coming over, putting up 12 points on 5 goals and 7 assists. 2 of his goals, 4 of his points coming with the man advantage. He's averaging just under 17 and a half minutes in ice time as a Ranger. That's almost 2.5 minutes less than he was averaging in Chicago, but he has been dealing with an ongoing hip injury, which likely has something to do with his numbers not screaming future Hall of Famer like they did in his prime in Chicago, and why the Rangers rested him down the stretch, keeping him out of their back-to-back set against Tampa Bay and St. Louis on April 5th and 6th. Took head coach Gerard Gallant some of those 19 games to figure out that whatever magic Kane and Artemi Panarin had as line mates in Chicago wasn't going to work in New York. The proof of that was the fact that Vincent Trocheck and Panarin had an expected goals for percentage of 55.36 without Kane compared to 38.38 with him. Panarin and Trocheck seemed to click better with Vladimir Tarasenko. Panarin's playmaking led the team with 63 assists, along with Trocheck's goal scoring. He's one of 5 Rangers with at least 20 goals, and Tarasenko's elite shot has made for a better second line. That line controlled the puck, outchanced their opponents, and scored goals. Panarin and Tarasenko have shown productivity together, and the line, now centered by Trocheck, has contributed 3 goals at 5-on-5 over the final 6 regular season games in April. Panarin and Trocheck are familiar with one another. They've been on the same line over the course of the year. Granted, the sample size is small, but the trio has developed some chemistry, which bodes well for the postseason. So that will have Kane on the number 1 line with Mike Zibanejad and Chris Kreider, who have been on the same line in the past and have been for 25 goals this season at 5-on-5. Kane has also spent time on the number 1 power play unit, and the Rangers' productivity with the man advantage has improved since Kane arrived. They were number 11 in the NHL at 22.7% before, and they've been at number 6, 27.1 since he started playing on it on March 2nd. The sample size with Kane on both the 1 line and the number 1 power play unit is small, but he seems to be finding his way with both heading into the playoffs, which is what the Rangers are hoping for. As I said, Kane may no longer be the Hall of Fame caliber player he was when he was leading the Chicago Blackhawks to 3 Stanley Cups in 6 seasons. And he doesn't need to be that for the Rangers, but he is a former Conn Smythe, Ted Lindsay, Calder, and Hart winner. He's got a ton of experience, especially postseason experience. He knows how to run the gauntlet that is the Stanley Cup playoffs, and he has a penchant for scoring in the clutch this time of year. In his distinguished career, Kane has put up 48 goals and 125 points in 136 playoff games, with 5 of those goals coming in overtime, including 2 in double OT, with the biggest coming in Game 6 of the 2009-2010 Stanley Cup Final to win the series. And as I said at the top, that's what he was brought in for, not the final 20 games of the regular season. If he can give the Rangers solid forward play on that number 1 line with Zibanejad and Kreider, and on either of the top 2 power play units, then the Rangers' chances of hoisting Lord Stanley's chalice get a whole lot better.
Let's see. The Eastern Conference is just a juggernaut, and this series is just the tip of the iceberg to what we're going to see from a possible long postseason run for either of these teams. And the other team, Anthony, is the Devils. What are you looking for in them?
Yeah, it's gonna be a hard couple of weeks for me because I have to ostracize my nephew who's a Devil fan and my niece who are Island fan. So there will not be no breaking, no sharing of the bread at the dinner table anytime soon. Not in this family. Yeah, it's going to be a pretty tough couple of weeks. But the Devils, the key to them is to do what they've been doing all season: play loose, play fast, and play up-tempo hockey. If there isn't such thing as fast-play hockey, this is the New Jersey Devils, who, similar enough, you talked about the Spider-Man meme. The Rangers was that fast-paced team last year that we saw that wanted to play up-tempo and get out in the open with all their weapons. The Devils is that very same team this year. So when you look at the Devils offense, they're led by the older Hughes brother, Jack Hughes, who pretty much set franchise records in scoring. For a team that averaged 3.5 goals a game, 5th in the NHL, 4th in shots per game at 34. And we've seen Igor Shesterkin, he's been great, not best of trophy great, but he's had his struggles when he's been peppered with shots at a nonstop rate. So that really plays in the Devils' favor. Hughes set a franchise record, 99 points, 43 goals, 56 assists, and 6 points, including 4 goals against the Rangers in the 4 regular season matchups. Timo Meier, a guy they brought in from San Jose, he has 40 goals in his own right between the 2 teams. Jesper Bratt has 32. Nico Hischier, he has 31 goals. And 3 other players have scored 20 goals this season for the Devils. But what the Devils are very good at is the transitional game. And when a forechecker is going to be very key as far as for the Devils, create opportunities, and for the Rangers, and I know I'm talking from the Devils standpoint, for the Rangers standpoint, and taking care of the puck, because the Devils transitional game, they scored the Rangers have the second most turnovers in their own zone.
832.
832. Timmy Panarin, the bread man, has 102 turnovers in his own right. So for the creativity, there's a lot of mistakes now, and for this double team, you probably don't want to do that. They've scored 43 goals in the transitional plays, basically forcing those turnovers. And you look according to Steve Valiquette, on a recent podcast, he said, pretty much the Rangers, it's tempting for them to go toe to toe and play at this fast pace, this quote document, helter skelter mentality. But it really favors the Devils at the end of the day, because this is literally how they have won so many games, and then you're able to get 112 points in the regular season. So it's actually forcing the Rangers to play a style they probably don't want to play at all, in part because the opponent actually is better at that game than they are. So the Devils, what they want to do is they want to put the pressure on the Rangers. They want to force the Rangers into the mistakes so that they get out to the open ice, and these weapons do get an opportunity. By the way, you added the younger Hugh brother, who is pretty good to score defensive play in his defenseman in his own right, who got his very first NHL goal and then overtime to win the game in overtime. So that's a memory that, by the way, his older brother got the assist on there. So when you look at the Devils and all the weapons they possess, it's going to be a matter of can they get the Rangers into this fast-paced, also a game like score fest, because it definitely favors them. And obviously, when you look at the goalie matchup, and that's what one disadvantage that the Devils do have going into this series. They probably want to have Igor Shesterkin work and be very busy, while keeping their own net minor as inactive as possible if he's not having to make so many saves. So this is what the Devils' fast advantage is going to be going into this series.
I'm not 100% sure that they can't win a series on Vitek Vanecek's goalie play for the Devils, because by the way, what are you doing, Capitals, who just lost their streak of consecutive postseasons this year? And one of the reasons why is they traded Vanecek for a third-round pick. And all Vanecek has done this year in 52 games played, 48 games started, is a record of 33-11 and a 2.45 goals against average. So a guy who was supposed to be pretty much fighting for time this year with Mackenzie Blackwood is not fighting for time this year and has been one of the best goaltenders in the league. And yet he might be the third best goaltender in the entire area, as we'll talk about in just a moment. But yeah, so Vanecek is going to be key. He does have a little bit of playoff experience. Both goaltenders might actually have the same amount of playoff experience, except Shesterkin's playoff experience last year was really, really good and almost got them to a Stanley Cup final. It was a little worse this year in terms of stats. 915 save percentage, 249 goals against average. But Shesterkin's been a lot better this last month of the season. And even though Anthony told you about the numbers, about how he might get peppered with odd man chances, Shesterkin's not going to play like that every single year, but you know that if Shesterkin gets 25 to 30 shots a game, you're going to win most of them, because Igor doesn't always make dumb mistakes. And if he does, he keeps them really accountable to one game and one game only. Shesterkin is going to be a finalist again for the Vezina Trophy, because he's third amongst goalies with 37 wins, and that save percentage and goals against average, while up, is still one of the best in the NHL. Shesterkin has the experience. He's going to probably have to do a little bit less than he did last year to get himself to a Stanley Cup final this year and a win in this series. Vanecek might have to do a little bit more. We'll see what happens. This is going to be a lot of fun, and for Anthony, a lot of agita at the dinner table. We'll see. All right. Speaking of teams with long playoff streaks, the Penguins' playoff streak of 16 years also ended. Thanks, guys. The Islanders needed a tiny bit of help in the last season, but their week went pretty good. In order, disappointing loss on Monday to take control out of their own destiny for playoff spot. Tuesday, Penguins lose to the Blackhawks to get their destiny back in their hands for a playoff spot. Wednesday, they clinched their playoff spot after beating the Montreal Canadiens. Thursday, they avoided the Bruins as the Panthers beat the Bruins and lost to the Hurricanes. And so the Islanders' playoff opponent is on the Metropolitan side of the bracket in the Carolina Hurricanes. Isles lost this season series 3-1. Isles have never had the best record against the Hurricanes, but it's not a team that had 136 points this season. So there's that. Anthony, give me a star to watch on the Islanders as they make another postseason run.
Yeah, Elias Sorkin is the guy I'm looking at. By the way, that Panther game, that was probably the craziest finish I've seen for a team that woke up and realized, good Lord, we want to avoid Boston in round one. We got to go.
Oh, yes.
So that was the one day. And yeah, the Islanders was the biggest winner of all this. They got into the playoffs because the Penguins stumbled with a chance to control their own destiny, and then got to avoid the Bruins, the Atlantic division of that bracket, which is basically the Bruins and possibly the Lightning in round two. So it was a double bonus for them. But yeah, Sorkin has been the guy. They look at the Islanders. You can make the case he's been the best player in the second half of the season without question. 31 victories in 62 starts this season. 2.34 goals against. 92 save percentage. League leading 6 shutouts during the regular season. Last year he had 7 among goalies at least 41 games. Linus Ullmark of the Boston Bruins had a better goals against. Michael Scott at 1.89. So I think we know who's doing the Vezina Trophy this season. When you look at the Bruins as a whole, but also he started 13 of the last 14 Island games this season. So he's been a non-stop workhorse, allowing 2 or fewer goals in 8 of them. 8-4-1, 0.919 save percentage, 2.32 goals against over that span. The Islanders, since late January, when the Islanders were 1 game over 500, he's been a big part of that. When the Islanders were 19-9 and 4 in the final 32 games. When you look at the series too, both teams are not great offensive teams. When you think about it, the Islanders may get a boost of Matthew Barzal coming back for the series, but it's going to come down to goaltending. And we've seen Carolina inability to score goals, and you have a really good goalie, and Sorkin being a netminder for the Islanders. So I'm like, this is a great. If you're going to pick an upset in the first round, this could be the most likeliest of the series that could end in an upset, because we've seen the cases of a hot goalie coming in around the right time, and now you have a Carolina Hurricanes team that really do struggle, and they want to slow the game down. Look, they are the cure for insomnia, if there is one, because I've never seen a good boring hockey team like the Carolina Hurricanes. But this is what was so successful to them up until a point last year when the Rangers kind of exposed them. If the Islanders can put a couple of goals up and you have Sorkin as a netminder, that's a great shot of an upset, because we've seen Carolina, their style of hockey is great for when you're ahead or winning in a game. But when they're having to play from behind, is where the disadvantage of that very conservative, very slow tempo style of hockey becomes a disadvantage. So I really think the Islanders have a great shot of winning this series. In fact, I'm going to go out on a limb. I say the Islanders win this series in 7 games, in part because of Sorkin's goalie playing net.
If the Islanders lose this series, don't tell your niece you made that pick on air.
No,
that's probably not the greatest idea in the world.
She is going to hate me for about a month. But
okay, she's going to hate you for your Ranger fandom anyway, but that might be not talking to you. That might be not talking to you territory there for that one, but we'll see what happens. All right, Jay, Surprise me again. Give me a X Factor or stat watch to watch for in the series.
Okay. Well, we all know that the focus and most of the ink will be on number one line forward Matthew Barzal, whose availability for the Isles first round matchup against Carolina is still officially TBD, though he thinks he's going to be able to go. And goalie Ilya Sorokin, as Anthony just mentioned, who's having a Vezina-worthy season. But where I'm looking at in terms of the X factor for the Islanders in this series, it's their second line of Brock Nelson, Pierre Engvall, and Kyle Palmieri that could determine whether or not the Isles get out of round one. Nelson was the Isles' most important player in the regular season other than Sorokin. He topped 30 goals for the second straight year with 36, along with a career high 39 assists, giving him a career high 75 points, which was 16 more than he had last season, which was his previous career high. He's also just one of just 5 Islanders, Zach Parise, Scott Mayfield, Ryan Pulock, and Anders Lee were the others, to lace up his skates for all 82 games. Head coach Lane Lambert put this line together on March 15 in Anaheim, and they lit the lamp 4 times in the Islanders' 6-3 win. In the final 13 games of the regular season, that line scored 15 goals at 5-on-5 while allowing just 4 against. And per natural stat trick, Nelson, Engvall, and Palmieri controlled 62.6% of the shot attempts and had an expected goal share of 58.8 when they were on the ice together. Nelson and Palmieri had 12 points apiece during that stretch, while Engvall had 7. In the 18 games Engvall's played since joining the Islanders, his 56.9% shot attempt share led the team. His 5-on-5 rating was +10, and he had 5 goals and 9 points. Starting on January 27th, the Islanders reeled off a 19-9-4 run. Nelson led the team with 32 points, 18 goals, 14 assists in those 32 games, but he had plenty of help from his line mates. 12 different Islanders recorded a game-winning goal over that span, including Engvall and Palmieri. Palmieri, who despite missing 27 of 28 games from late November to late January, was the Isles' second leading scorer from that January 27th date through the end of the season. Engvall's brought speed and pop to the Islanders' middle six. With Toronto, he was above average at retrieving the puck in the defensive zone, but was among the top forwards in possession exits, according to the Athletics hockey stats guru Corey Snyder. That fits in well with the Islanders, who clear the puck out of their own zone more often than they exit it with possession. The Islanders are hoping to see Engvall make an impact in the playoffs. He has 17 games of postseason experience over the last 3 years, but he's never made it out of the first round. He brings a different skill set to a team that's schematically constructed for the playoffs, and now he, along with Nelson and Palmieri, have a chance to carry the success of those final 13 games into the postseason. Regarding the play of his second line over the final few weeks, Lambert said, quote, "It was key, and the acquisition of Pierre and putting him with those two guys really paid dividends. They've been driving us. Brock's been driving us. He scored big goals when we needed him to do that. He's really led the way, and those guys have done a great job," end quote. They need to keep that up as the Islanders' chase for Lord Stanley's chalice begins.
All right, so I have the Hurricanes player to watch. And side note, yes, it's Sebastian Aho. And other side note, Sebastian Aho will win this series. I can guarantee that. Why do you ask? Because the Islanders also have a defenseman named Sebastian Aho on their team as well. So it's an Aho situation. All right, so the one that is the forward for the Carolina Hurricanes is not their leading point getter this season, but Martin Nikas had 71, but he scored 36 goals, leading the team in goals for a 6th straight season, and second in points with 31, second in points with 31 assists, 6 and 7 overall. Andrei Svechnikov is out after having season-ending knee surgery. So that first line, you're going to focus on Aho to be a guy who's going to get goals at a high pace. He's also, by the way, in 48 career playoff games, had 18 goals and 28 assists. So he's a man with a lot of experience in this postseason. The Hurricanes are a team that is also fast, but they were exposed a lot last year, especially in the goaltending spot by the Rangers. They still were a 110 plus point team this year. I think 116, I think, or no, 113 was the final number. They finished 1 point ahead of the Devils. And that's one of the teams that really knows that the time is now to make a run, because they've been expected to do this for years. A team like Boston went from a wild card last year to their 136 point game season. They'll be back. We don't know what's going to happen in this postseason, but one thing's for sure, it's going to be very interesting in this Islanders Hurricane series. I can see this probably being a long series. Islanders are going to have to obviously get one of the first two in Carolina for that to happen. But all I can tell you is Sebastian Aho is going on to round 3. All right.
Oh man, it's just a great time. I mean, you got the NBA playoffs, you got the Stanley Cup playoffs starting, you got baseball season in full swing. I mean, this is what being a sports fan is all about, pretty much.
Guys, I don't know if I have enough bandwidth to survive these last 2 months. So please check on me every now and then.
And in 12 days, the NFL draft.
Yeah.
Guys, guys, I really don't know if I have enough bandwidth to the next few months. So please check on me at many times.
By the way, late update. According to Woj, Julius Randle likely to play game 1. So if he's able to at least come off the bench even to give him a few minutes, that'd be a big boost to the Knicks.
I think the one thing that I'm interested to see again with Randall is his integration back into the offense. As a man is an Iron Man, so it's a man who doesn't really take a lot of time off. But as much as it's funny because I bitched to Anthony, and I will say this word that this offense is different with Randall and no Brunson, and the fact that it could still go, but you don't have like Brunson is a number 1 scorer. But having Brunson and Randall on the court, as much as you might hate the way Randall plays, and he plays very weird defensively and offensively at times. Just if you want
one of the best roast shot shooters I've ever seen in my life.
If you ever saw it, take a look at the game when if you know it, take a look at the game-winning shot he had against Miami. That's the 2022-23 Julius Randle experience in a nutshell. By the way, he's going to be an all-NBA player too. So as much as I'm bitching about it's still though, he is a bucket getter, and he is a guy who, when he doesn't have to do too much, is really, really one of the 20 to 25 best players.
Hey, Rabbi, can I throw out a mini rant before we close out of here?
Go ahead.
Okay. You guys are aware, I believe, of the free throw defense the Toronto Raptors put out.
It's what the Chicago Bulls did to the Toronto Raptors. Yes, it worked out really well.
There you go. So all I have to say, and I echo DeMar Rosen on this, any internet trolls out there who, for some inexplicable reason, think it's cool or feel they have the right to hide behind their keyboard and threaten, and I'm not saying this lightly, actually threaten the life of a 9-year-old girl because she's screaming at your players when they're attempting to shoot free throws, your priorities in life are beyond screwed up. Get a life, get some help. She's 9.
She's 10, but yes, agreed, if I'm not mistaken, but it doesn't really matter. That, by the way, I would like to hire her to scream at the Knicks this postseason. You shoot 50% from if you help the other team shoot 50% from the line and leave 18 points off on the board, you deserve it.
Yeah, I've been to Scotiabank Arena. That sound travels very well in that venue. So imagine a shrieking little girl screaming. Just as the other 18,000 fans are quiet, you can pretty much hear it's common sense that her scream is going to stand out in a stadium that gets quiet when the home team is shooting a free throw.
Yep. And DeMar, you are correct. You need to up her allowance.
Yeah.
You owe her some money.
You need to put her on the fucking payroll, that's for sure. All right.
Give her a playoff share.
Well, unfortunately, she's not going to get a playoff share because they didn't make the playoffs. They only
but United Airlines did offer her flight, so she will get at least 1 or 2 free flights.
There you go. There you go.
All right. With all that being said, enjoy the playoffs, guys. That does it for another edition of On the Sports Lines. For Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, I am the guy in the fleece and not the sports-related shirt. As Jay is yelling at another James Harden turnover during the postseason, remember that you can watch this show live on Facebook.com/OnTheSportsLines. As Anthony is wondering why Igor Shesterkin had to make his 50th save in a playoff game, and the Rangers are still down 3-1 after 2 periods. I'm guaranteeing you that happens. Watch us on demand at youtube.com/OnTheSportsLines. And as I'm wondering why Obi Toppin still hasn't been put into the Knicks game when it's 5 minutes left to go in the third freaking quarter, at ONTH Sportslines on Twitter for news, notes, and other links. It could be baseball, it could be basketball, it could be football as we head into the draft. Aaron Rodgers might become a Jet officially someday in the next 3 years. Take a look at the feed for all of your notes. We will be back soon. We will be having an NFL draft show, by the way. Get ready for that. I am available, so we will all be available. So get ready for that in about a week and a half from On the Sports Lines. Have a good afternoon.
Definitely, everyone.
Y'all.